Thank you. Special thank you to Matt for creating that. And, it seems like just God provides and God gives us what we need. And we are grateful for that. Did you enjoy it? Didn't you enjoy that? Getting to see the pictures and getting to see some of the people that were there. And that was just a portion of the people that were there. And there again, that gathering. I know I said something a few Sundays ago, and I'll say it again today because I think it needs a little bit of explanation. When I go to a gathering like that, it is every bit as worshipful and connecting me to God as it is being here today. And that has been a transition from the way that I was taught, the way kind of that I felt or that I embraced. But I'm realizing now that God wants me to be comfortable in my connecting to Him so it feels more natural. So when I'm at work, when I'm with my family, when I'm outside of a religious space, or when it's not on a religious day of the week that maybe religiously we've known as a day to go to church, because I don't know about you, I need my connection to God every day, every hour of every day. I need to know and feel and sense my connection to God. And what I'm sensing is this is helping things to be more natural. I don't have to be in a certain posture. I don't have to be saying certain church words to feel this connection to God or to sense that God is with me or that God is here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to expand upon what it means to live in the Spirit. We're going to expand it from a religious definition to a spiritual definition. Religiously, things are defined and we give it language, which is form, and we identify then certain terms based upon what we've learned religiously. However, what I'm learning is that there can be a difference between what we learn spiritually and what we learn religiously. Religion needs a form. Spirituality really doesn't need a form. It is formless. It can be any day. It can be anywhere. It can be any place. It can be any person. And it doesn't have to have necessarily the form. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with form. This is not about being right or wrong. This is about connecting to God. This is about feeling the connection to God wherever we are. So living an inspired life or living a life in the Spirit. What I hope to ask you to consider this morning is, are they not the same? Are they not equal? Now, we haven't really necessarily made them the same or equal, but that doesn't mean it's not so. So what we're going to uncover a few words today. One is the word inspiration, which is we're going to talk about the difference between inspiration and motivation. There is a difference between the two. And then we're going to talk about coincidence. We're going to especially those two words, inspiration and coincidence. And hopefully through understanding that things are not just coincidental, we will begin to trust in the Spirit that is leading us and guiding us through everything in life, both good and bad. And really, we come to a point where we don't even start saying something is good or something is bad. We just take it all in as a part of life. We're the ones that attach a meaning to it, but in reality, it's just the happening of life, like the rising and the setting of the sun. So we're going to talk about this. And I'm going to try to make it as expansive as I can and be able to expand it. And the purpose of expanding it is so that you and I can live in the Spirit and we can live an inspiring life wherever we are. And it's really not a religious associated term necessarily. By living in the Spirit, living out of the soul, living according to us Nazarenes would have said, living according to the sanctified self or the true self or the sacred self, regardless of what name. See, when we are attached to form, the name is vital. When we're not attached to form, we see a variety of uses of terms and language that can identify something, and it doesn't even have to be identified by religious language. because we recognize it is just a part of what is, which is God. It's a part of this source. I mean, can God not be? If God is love, can love not be? If God is Spirit, then can Spirit not be? So if God is Spirit, then is it Spirit in everything that is? So every form, underneath every form is a spirit, a soul. Now we're used to talking about this in religious terms about when we die or going to heaven or bless your soul or may your soul be at rest. But there is a deeper accessing that Jesus introduces to us of living in the Spirit. The Scripture says Jesus was full of the Spirit. The Scripture says that Jesus went and followed the Spirit. Notice, He was following a deeper part of Himself. He was following His soul. He was following His sanctified self, His true self, which you and I all have access to that same thing because we all have that same thing. We all have a soul, a spirit. That is the deeper part of it. You are not the person that you are on the exterior. That's just an aspect of you are. You are not your name. My last name is Beckett. That is just a form of who I am. There is much more to Jeff than meets the eye. If you don't believe me, ask my wife, ask my son. They'll say there's much more to this guy than meets the eye, and some of the things you may not want to know about. There's much more. And if you and I are able to tap into this part of us that is our connection to God, that is a flame of God itself, that is a portion of God itself, that is of the essence of God because we came from God. If we can learn to tap into, this is what the church notoriously and historically has tried to teach throughout the years. But somehow we sometimes get trapped by form, and then we maybe don't quite understand, fully comprehend, fully experience. This is not just about knowledge, giving you knowledge. This is about so you can experience. Because when you're living in the Spirit, you're experiencing love. You're experiencing fear being abstained from you. You're experiencing. But when you're not in the Spirit, is when you're experiencing these other things. So let's hopefully we can learn how it is we live in the Spirit and learn a little bit more about this. There's really not a better story in the Bible to talk about this than the story of Job. And I've just given the first 3 verses at the beginning of the book of Job, but if you were to take the book of Job, you were to take these initial remarks about Job, kind of his biography, a little bit about his life and what he had and what the things that were a part of his life. And then you have some of his friends that enter on the scene and they give him some words about what their thoughts are about why he lost things and why these things were taken from him. So let's kind of just, there once was a man named Job who lived in the land of, that's not Oz, Uz. He was blameless. It's kind of giving you a little bit about Job. He was a man of great integrity. He feared God, stayed away from evil. He had 7, you see about his family and his possessions and all that he owned. And it says he was the richest person of that entire area. If you were to take the book of Job, please do remember the Bible is not always to be taken literally. A lot of it is literal, but not everything. I'm not sure some of you that have a background in the Church of the Nazarene understand that we as Nazarenes do not believe the Bible is to be taken literally. We do not believe that. We believe there are portions of the Bible that are literal, but there is much in the Bible that is metaphorical. That is Jesus' parables. We spoke of one of them. In other words, they have deeper meanings. There is a literal meaning, but there are meanings underneath the meanings that can mean different things. And we talked about one of Jesus' parables last week. So it's important to think that the story of Job is not just a literal story. It's metaphorical in many ways. A book that sometimes people like to study, this point in case, is the book of Revelation. It is a purely metaphorical book. And a lot of times it's been interpreted over time to be literal, and parts of it may be literal, but yet it can be metaphorical also. So in other words, it has other meanings. And that makes the Bible even much more of a beautiful book, to think that God could inspire people to write something that can mean one thing to one generation and another thing to another. Just blows my mind. But see, that's what God can do. That's when things come from Him. They can mean something to one generation, to all generations, and that's a beautiful thing. So as we think of Job, we think of his friends, then we think of how Job himself is given several chapters where he just kind of curses the day that he was born, and he expresses his frustration. And then there are several chapters where God begins to speak. And God is saying, where were you, Job, when I fed the goat that was up on the mountain? Were you there when I formed all of these things? So Job is an amazing story of life. Not of the curse of God upon a man, but of the story of life. We have our things that we lose. We have our things that we gain. But how do you look at them? What is the meaning you give to them? So we're going to kind of use the story of Job as a guideline this morning to our discussing. What is it that inspires you? When you think of being inspired, real quick, what is something that inspires you? What inspires? Anything inspire you? What was that? Breaking 80. Is that like are you talking about the age of 80, or are you talking about the golf game? Oh, sure. I was starting to figure, is Bob talking about how old he is? Or? Yeah, that's inspiring. Yes, Jim, what inspires you? Beautiful, beautiful. It's amazing. Anything? Yes, Sam, what are you inspired by? Yes. Sheila, did you raise your hand? Kindness inspires you. Did you raise your hand, Michael? Inspired to be God's best. I want you to think about the word inspired, because we're going to look at it today. And we're going to identify, when is it you're living in the Spirit? We're not so trying to put a form there as much as we are to help you to see, if you sense you're not living in the Spirit, then simply return to it. It's really that simple. Well, I got to go to the priest and pray. I got to go back to church. No, you don't. Just simply return to Spirit. Instantly. Right there in the moment. Now, we're going to discuss more about doing that. I must confess to you, as a young man growing up, that some of my challenges was I thought that once I came to church on Sunday, the week needed to go a certain way. And then when it didn't, I thought, well, I can't wait till I get back to church. And now I'm like, wow, you don't have to wait for the pastor, or you don't even have to wait to pick up a Bible. You don't have to wait for your friend. You don't have to wait for anything. And all of those things are good. But I want you to begin to see that you can instantly, literally, simply return to Spirit. Get back to that deeper part of you that is in touch with God and is connected to God. And as you're learning the difference between when you're in the Spirit and when you're not. Now, we're going to learn a little bit about this today. See, when you're religious, you're learning mainly from certain acceptable forms, words, language. But when you expand it to being concerned with being spiritual, then you have learning tools everywhere. All things are on the table, and all things are a part of things as they are. So when you're concerned about being spiritual, it concerns 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's concerned about your job, your family life. In your perception, when you have a bad day, in your perception, when you have a good day, when your spirit is not touched by any of that. It's that eternal part. There is a part of you that has not changed since the day you were born into form, and that is your spirit. Your body will grow older because it's formed, but even as you look in the mirror and your face gets older, there's a part of you that has never gotten any older. That is your soul, your spirit, your sanctified self. This is the part that Jesus was trying to manifest that all of us could be aware of. How to connect to this part of us that is ageless. That is literally ageless, that cannot die. It is not able, because it is come forth from God. It cannot die. So as we learn how to live daily from this, rather from whatever story we've gotten attached to a situation or a circumstance. So living an inspired life, in my opinion, and living a life in the Spirit are becoming one and the same. So someone can live an inspired life, not necessarily meet religious categories or qualifications, but because the only reason they can live inspired life is because that's the Spirit in them that is living through them. You can't live, the word inspiration, smack dab in the middle of it is spirit. So the original word, inspiration, inspirational, any of the forms of that word refer to a living out of the Spirit. Now, so we've made it like a totally secular word. We've made it a word that we've not necessarily associated with church or religion. However, it's really where it came from, because you can't live an inspirational life or an inspired life unless it's that part of you. So when you see someone living an inspired life or doing something inspirational, they are living out of their soul. They are living out of that connection to God. That's why it's important that you and I find that and discover that, so that we aren't living. See, I want you to begin to. There's the difference between inspiration and motivation. Motivation is basically you're pulling something along. Motivation is a word that it's appreciated in our culture, and we look at it as a positive tool, but ego's all over it. Ego is all over motivation. Inspiration is when you are pulled along. Motivation is when you're pulling. I'm going to get that done. I don't care come hell or high water. I'm going to get that done. I'm going to accomplish that. That has every color of ego form. When I say ego, I don't mean necessarily pride or boasting. I mean there's an attachment to this form, this body, this lifetime that we know now, right now. Whereas when we're inspired, something inside of us is pulling us along. They may even say to you, why are you doing that? And you say, I feel compelled. I feel drawn to do it. I've got to do it. And you're drawn from within to do that. So inspirational or inspire or inspiration is being in the Spirit. An idea has taken a hold of you. I believe every invention came from there. Whether it's chemistry or biology or psychology, regardless of what field of scholarly study, as a matter of fact, if you look through history, the church has had a hard time with technology sometimes. I know when Galileo, for example, when he began to discover that the earth was not the center of the universe, but the sun was, it was the church that gave him problems at that time. It was religion, it was the institution that kind of, he actually hid his information in books or in papers, and actually he did not actually reveal the truth of that. It was unveiled once he was martyred, and then the next leading scientist came along, and it was the next one that actually brought it to fruition, and not so much Galileo, because it was how the church felt about those things. So as we think about, when I think of a doctor who wants to understand an illness, when I think of a scientist that wants to understand molecules and they want to understand metaphysics, when I hear psychologists wants to understand why a human behaves the way that they do or why they don't, Folks, these are all from Spirit, from God, from our source. We may not have associated with that, but these are inspirational. These inspire you. Those people are tapping into that part of God that is within them and living from that. So how do we do that today? These opportunities to live an inspired life literally arise every day. Every day. Every day, your spirit is kind of like a tuning fork. You know, you've got your radio in your car, and you've got an FM station on. You turn it to 103.5. It will get into the frequency of that which is tuned in. In the same way, your spirit, every day you get out of bed, your spirit is there. It is. You say, well, I'm not. It is. You don't have to feel it there. It is there because you were born with it. You were spirit before you were formed. You came from God before you came into this body. But as we learn to those things, I know Sheila mentioned kindness. You mentioned as you start, you're inspired to do these kind of things. You're inspired to go to these kind of places. You're living out of your spirit rather than living. You know, there was a time in my life when I felt like if I wasn't reading religious books all the time, that I wasn't in the Spirit. And I've learned I can be inspired by looking at so many things, not just religious books. I can be inspired by so many things. And people, you can be inspired by them. So as we think about this, here's the term coincidence. Does anybody, what is that when you think of coincidence? What is a coincidence? Does anybody know what is a coincidence? Yeah, that's what we've been told, and that's really what we thought. It just came together by coincidence. But you know what? Coincidence is a mathematical term. It actually refers to two angles coinciding together at the perfect place. Two angles coming together at an exact congruence. It's not coincidence. It's a perfect arrangement of divinity and humanity. It's a perfect arrangement, two stars meeting in the night. Have you ever thought about the things that we label as coincidental? Maybe is God lining things up. So as we learn to live in the Spirit, we learn to trust in coincidences. We learn to believe in coincidences. We learn to trust in what we call life more than we do our own ability to control life. So as we think about coincidences, we start recognizing, even as this story of Job, what happened, his responses, his friends. The story of Job is in the Scriptures not by coincidence. It is there because God wanted a story there where people could see there was a man that had a lot that happened in his life, and he could have, and he did it. He was angry, he was hurt, he was lonely, he was depressed. And God does not withhold that information from us. Aren't you glad? The Scripture that gives the real, true story of what Job went through. And the responses of friends. So these opportunities to live an inspired life arise literally every day. But the question is, do we welcome them or do we resist them? This is the key. The key to learning to live in the Spirit is, do we welcome them? By welcoming them means we accept it, meaning we don't resist it. It means that I guess God must have a bigger plan. I wonder what God is up to. This wasn't meant to be. Or we can resist it. No, I don't like that. I said, that is the challenge. I've faced it with my own physical challenges. When I don't feel good, I resist it. I want to feel better, and I don't want to feel that way. And I'm starting to learn, Jeff, just welcome it. That's a part of your healing. A part of healing is feeling things that you don't like to feel and working through that. Learning not to resist things. I put that upcoming, you can see, winter storm. What was the forecast? We're going to get 5 to 7 inches or something. I'm thankful we didn't get it. But you could resist something like that and say, I hate winter storms. That's resistance. I don't like that didn't happen. That's That's not welcoming it. As we begin to welcome and trust in coincidence, and what has been termed as coincidental, we trust is that it's our Creator's plan. It's our Maker's. It's the way He's bringing things together. And I tell you, if it wasn't for coincidence, some of us would not even be married right now. Because we showed up. How did you meet your spouse? How did you run into that person? How did you get that job? How did you meet that friend? All these things by chance? No, we either welcome them. I want you to start thinking about it. When something comes into your life that you don't like, do you resist it or do you welcome it? And when something comes into your life that you like, do you feel like then that's the only way you can welcome things is for everything to be the way that you like? This has been a not so good day. Even that phrase is resistance. It's not living in spirit. See, this is about, living in spirit has to do with the energy that even your body or your thoughts. I was going to show you a video today, but I changed my mind on the power of your thoughts, let alone your words, and how it changes water molecules. And how, I know Sam was kind enough to send me an email on Messenger. He sent me a video clip to make me aware of some of this. And an experiment was done on water molecules to see if you had thoughts toward it. Gratitude, blessing, kindness. The water molecules literally would adapt and change into beautiful. When they would crystallize, they would be gorgeous. However, if you would curse it or you would be angry at it, it would get all distorted. And your body is literally 90% water. So if you're thinking these kind of things and you're emitting this kind of energy, it not only is affecting those around you, it's affecting your own body. It's affecting your own health. So when we say things like this is not this, and I'm so thankful for the awareness that our Creator is giving. We need to ask ourselves: is this living in spirit? In other words, you're making a judgment of a day based upon your judgment rather than welcoming it as a day. It's a day. Is it a good day or bad day? I'm really not too concerned anymore if it's a good day or a bad day. It's a day. It's a day that I'm here and my Creator has given me this day. So trying to get more and more comfortable recognizing. You just start recognizing when you're emitting this negative energy, when you're kind of putting out this form, this ego, this attachment to having to know things. Really, that's what having to know. You become more comfortable with not knowing things. You start becoming more comfortable trusting in a Creator and more comfortable not having to know everything. But we like that. Form loves to know things. I want to know everything God's doing. I want to know when this is going to happen. I want to know how it's going to turn out. And we're good at one. But that is got ego written all over it because ego is about control. And there again, when I say ego, I mean an attachment to the form. The form wants to know this kind of stuff. When will I be born? When will I die? When will I get better? When will things improve? When you think about it, for 9 months of your life, you didn't do anything but exist in your mother's womb, and everything was provided for you. You came in, and I think they tell us that on the head of a pin of a needle, you were so small, so much of you could fit on. but yet there was your heart, there was your lungs, there was your genes. Everything developed and grew in those 9 months. And then you came out. Why don't we start picturing the rest of our life like those 9 months? We start becoming aware, noticing when we're not in Spirit, noticing. And you're not in Spirit just because you didn't come to church on Sunday. You're not in Spirit just because you didn't read your Bible today. You're not in Spirit because you didn't read a religious book today. You're not in Spirit when it's as simple as just these types of things that we're talking about. Now, this is not to make it hard or difficult. This is to make it a process that you can enjoy. Do you really need to have a like-dislike relationship with life? I mean, when you start thinking about it, well, I like my life. Here's the trouble. When you say there's certain things you like, then life has to be that way for you to like it. Right? So if life doesn't turn out the way you want it, then you don't like it. But so the goal then in our life becomes to do everything we can do to keep things turning out the way we like it to turn out. And then as long as they keep turning out that way, we're going to like life. How many have ever found out that there are many days that don't go the way you wish they would go? There are many events that happen in life that you're thinking, that wasn't really what I was hoping for. Maybe it's better for us to enter into a day and say, you know what, I'm not being attached to what I like or what I dislike. My God, there is a Creator. I'm connected to this God and Creator. He lives inside of me. And I'm living today trusting there's a plan bigger for me than I can see. Because right now you may only be seeing one side of that plan. You see the yuckiness of it. You see the pain of it. You see the struggle of it. And right now it hurts. And it doesn't mean you stand up and say, oh God, I'm just so grateful for this day. And you're feeling bad. No, you say, God, I don't feel good today. Man, God, these things are happening today. But you recognize that there is a bigger plan. So you start developing this new... So to simply return to Spirit, for example, you would say, I don't like this day. To get back in Spirit, what do you say? This is a day I'm here. You just move away from an attachment to like or dislike, and you get back in this, because your spirit doesn't know any day. It's always been. It doesn't know any day. How old is your spirit? It's eternal. It has no attachment to form. There is a part of you that God wants to enable you and I to live from that is ageless. That He wants to enable us to be able to connect to, that is not attached to good or bad, is not attached to, it has always been there because it came forth from God. We get into trouble when we get attached to things. To simply return to Spirit is simply to do that, we kind of have to quiet ourselves, but I'm going to give you a little bit more thoughts on that before we go in just a moment. But that's what words like dread or regret. So you get into the present. Being in the Spirit is being here now. Being in Spirit is not. If you're not in the Spirit when you're talking about the past. You're not in the Spirit necessarily when you're looking solely at the future. You are in, because this is all you have, is now. All you have is the present. So you're in Spirit. That doesn't mean you don't make plans, and it doesn't mean you don't look. There's a time to do that. You can make plans in Spirit for the future, and you also can look back in the past in Spirit and look at it as lessons and things to learn. But reality is, you do not have the past and you do not have the future. The reality is the only thing you have now is now. So every day, so the future becomes, tomorrow will become now. And when yesterday happened in the past, it was then. So you say, well, that happened back then. Well, that's looking back, and that's not living in Spirit. But to live in Spirit is simply return to the present. Return to this moment. Not what your mind's telling you about the way you felt this way, and when you felt that way 5 years ago, and now you're associating what you feel today with what you did 5 years ago, or what someone did to you today. You're associating what someone else did to you, or you're fearful of what somebody's going to do. No, you get back in the present. You know what I'm learning is we're going so quick through life, we just don't notice any of this. We're just like, duh. We're just going so fast. And we're just going, we don't maybe know where we're going. But when we're able to kind of just slow down, and that doesn't mean you do nothing, but it means you start getting in the present. So words like dread or regret, you start recognizing, if I'm regretting, I'm not in the Spirit. If I'm in regret, I'm not in the Spirit. So no wonder why. So, and if I'm in dread, I'm not in the Spirit. We start recognizing it. We start being aware of it. Wow, I never realized that. Because you'll notice when you're dreading, all this energy and baggage start coming on you. When you're regretting, all this energy that is not so good starts being attracted to you and starts just kind of getting on your back, getting on your mind. So this is what we do. We allow the suchness of the moment. That's a word. Whatever the suchness, whatever the moment is, and not the story the mind is created around it. Or you know what that means when someone walks by you and they look that way. Or you know what that means when this day goes that way. You know what that means, don't you? So when there's a whole story, and you surrender. Surrender is surrender to that moment. No, I'm not going to think about the future. I'm not going to dwell on regret. I'm here right now. The sun is still in the sky right now. The birds are still singing right now. The moon is still up there right now. But the mind wants to create all these stories, man. It wants to create all these memories and all these negative feelings and all these thoughts about that event or that experience. And just surrender. You surrender. Begin to no longer demand that a person or place makes you happy. Wow. That's not someone else's responsibility. Maybe that's why David began to learn in his life. He began to learn, that he encouraged himself in the Lord. He encouraged himself in the Lord. He didn't leave that on somebody else to do that for him. Isn't it interesting how we demand people? The church, we demand pastor, we demand bosses, we demand spouses. I want you to know something. I'm right where you're at. I'm not above you. My wife could sit right up here right now with me, and man, she would be able to help me out on this point. I'm learning. Gosh, I'm learning that there's so many things. When I'm not in Spirit, I'm learning. I can be in this building, but that doesn't mean I'm in Spirit. I've learned that I can even be reading the Bible, and that doesn't even mean I'm in Spirit. I could be reading it with a critical mind. I could be reading it trying to prove somebody wrong. I could be reading it to try to get back at somebody. I could be reading it to try to get us, who knows? See, the form looks a certain way, acts a certain way, but that's really not what we're talking about here. Anita Morjani is a lady that had a near-death experience. I've read her book recently. It's called Dying to Be Me. And her story is about how she encountered God after she left this form. And she began to realize, though, that she really that God had been a part of her life throughout her whole life. But one of the cool things that she talks about in her book that is really cool and I think is really neat is she just, and sometimes when you get on the internet, get on a YouTube channel, she's on a TED Talk. I've given the book, or given word of the book to a few people, and it's really helped me. But one of the things, the fascinating things that she says in that book about dying to be me is how she began to realize that her cell phone was ringing. That she heard things. There was this awareness that even when her eyes were closed and her husband was crying because she was dying, that she was aware, even though her eyes were closed, she was aware that he was there. And she was aware that he was looking at her, even though her eyes were closed. It started making me think about my mother's passing and other people that I've seen when you've seen them maybe on a ventilator or something and you're thinking they can't hear you, or you're thinking how much do they really know what's going on. It kind of, her book allowed me to see, wow, that we are so much beyond this form. We're so much beyond this form. It's like your soul has been vacuumed. You get this vacuum bag, you can put it underneath your bed, you put all the sweaters and blankets in, then you put a vacuum, it sucks it up to a mini size, and you can put it under there. It's almost like God has put your spirit into this body. But all of our life we've been talking about, this is who I am, this is who I associate myself with, when it's really not, it's only an aspect of who we are. You are really so expansive and you're so connected to God and you're so amazing because you are from God. And this is the part that God wants you to live from. You don't need somebody else to make that expansive part make you happy. You can find it and create it. It kind of becomes cool. We start developing the games. I'm going to make myself happy today. Oh, well, you need somebody? Nope, I don't need. I'm going to find some things. So I'm going to start living a life of inspiration. So walking in the Spirit for you becomes, I'm going to do those things that inspire me. I'm going to go those places that inspire me. I'm going to read those books that inspire me. I'm going to be around the kind of people that inspire me. I'm going to spend my time with those who are inspirational. And I'm going to build my life around the word inspiration because I want to be inspired. See, the more you see those coincidences as not by chance, but as orchestrations by an amazing God, the more harmonious you see that life is and that you can trust life just as it is. Inspiration is being in spirit where an idea takes hold of you. Motivation is where you're pulling an idea along behind you and you're struggling to pull it along, but you're going to grit your teeth and that's the difference between motivation and inspiration. Wow. We're just simply trying to go back home. All that we're really trying to teach, living in the Spirit is going back home. Living from what you were intended to live from. That's what in Spirit is. Coincidences, motivation, the difference between inspiration and motivation. Well, it's January 10 through 2016. It's a new year. You're going to be more this year than you were last year because you're going to be more aware this year than you were. We've got a clip we're going to show you to conclude the service with. It's kind of a New Year's blessing for you and some words for you to think about. And there's a phrase in this song that says, I'm going to find the light in this new year. I'm going to find the light. So this is my challenge to you as you leave here today. Look for the light, and you find the light by looking for those things that inspire you. And follow then follow the inspiration in your heart, not so much your head, and start living from your heart. Levi just told me recently, he was reading something, they said kind of an acronym for the word heart is His art. God. His. Your heart is His art. That's why you have the unique desires that you have. Jane mentioned some things. You mentioned things that inspire you. Bob did. His art. And live His art. You are a beautiful painting. You live His art. Jesus was all about setting people free. Setting people free to be themselves, to be the way He created them, to live in the Spirit, not in this form. Watch this clip and you'll catch this line to look for the light.